Helldivers 2. We all know how of an amazing game this is, and as you know, the Great Galactic War is determined by us and how it usually goes. Now, even though the mechanical overlord Joel is twisting and pulling the strings of all the enemies within our galaxy, I had an idea. What if we take one galaxy and the galaxy from Helldivers and combine the two? Now, by what I mean is, what if the Helldivers invaded Pandora? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about Pandora from Borderlands. Now, if you played Borderlands, you should know how challenging of a task controlling Pandora is. Now, the more I thought about this, the more realistic it kind of sounded, because Super Earth could technically do what all the companies failed to do with Pandora, and that is controlling it, like truly controlling it. So, before we get into the meat of things, I need to remind everyone that this video is brought to you by the Ministry of Truth. Because remember, truth and liberty above all else. In order to talk about Pandora, we must understand its history. Now, Pandora wasn't always the wasteland that it was. Once upon a time, it was a mining planet, from my knowledge. Now, the planet used to be under the control of Dahl. Now, Dahl basically went to Pandora and drained Pandora of all of its materials, its oil, its natural resources, its trees, and basically everything, every natural resource that you know. Dahl pretty much stripped it from Pandora. Now, there is some audio logs and some stories that pretty much describe this, but when Dahl realized that Pandora has no more financial value and, well, no value in general, Dahl just gathered all of the important stuff that they had on Pandora and just abandoned everything else. They abandoned the equipment, their lower workers, and just pretty much everything that wasn't of value. And because of that, the workers and the stuff that was on Pandora just went completely south. So the workers became raiders, and the settlers just pretty much had to survive what was left of the Dahl occupation. Now, eventually, the discovery of the first vault was found, and because of that, everyone started looking for vaults around the galaxy. Now, what are vaults? Vaults are just pretty much alien treasure that the Iridians pretty much, how do I describe the Iridians? The forerunners of Borderlands. That's pretty much the best way I can describe the Iridians. But pretty much the Iridians, the architects of the galaxy of Borderlands, pretty much made treasure vaults, hid them, and hoped nobody would open them. How well that went. Now, pretty much, Pandora was the Wild West for the treasure hunt for the vaults. Now, because of this, the second company to do an occupation on Pandora was Atlas. Now, Atlas, of course, went to Pandora to look for the vaults. And soon enough, the citizens and the people of Pandora started fighting Atlas, and, well, Pandora just got even more chaotic. Now, this is when eventually the events of Borderlands 1 would happen. Now, Just like some people, I didn't fully complete the first Borderlands game because, well, I don't know why I didn't complete it, but I didn't fully finish it, so I can't fully talk about Borderlands 1 because I wouldn't have a clue on what I'm talking about. But after Borderlands 1, the pre-sequel would happen, and, well, Jack would, of course, rise to power, and soon enough, the Hyperion invasion of Pandora would begin. Now, after the Vault of the Destroyer was opened, Iridium started appearing, and Hyperion wanted all of it. Now, when Jack would take control of Hyperion, he wanted to rid Pandora of all of the bandits, all of the raiders, and pretty much turn Pandora into a civilized society. A very controlled, civilized society. Now, Jack did make some progress, just in the end, Jack got to the Vault of the Destroyer, but of course, things didn't end well for Jack. Now, of course, a few minor events would happen, well, maybe not minor, but some important events would happen after Borderlands 2. But I think one of the important events was the Tales from the Borderlands. Now, Tales from the Borderlands was when Reese, Fiona, and all their friends went on a grand quest to find the Vault of the Traveler. Now then all 5 episodes would, of course, happen. But when they would get to the Vault of the Traveler, they would be granted their wishes, because yes, that is what lies within the Vault of the Traveler, wishes. Now, then after Tales of the Borderlands, I think the fight for Sanctuary would happen, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's what happens next. But pretty much Sanctuary would get destroyed, but after what I would believe maybe 7 years after the events of Borderlands 2, Borderlands 3 would happen now. The COV would rise, and they would be led by Tyreen and Troy Calypso, and, well, the Crimson Raiders and the new Vault Hunters would fight against the COV, and of course they would eventually defeat the COV, and the DLCs would also happen after the main story. Now, I'm sorry if I ended up getting some of you lost in that explanation, but pretty much, in summary, the history of Pandora is just one situation making everything worse for Pandora while the Crimson Raiders try and make things better. But with this understanding and this summary, this would bring us to our next important topic. When would this invasion take place? Now, obviously, when this would take place would be important, but I think I'm going to have this what if take place during Borderlands 3. Now, the reason why I want this to take place in Borderlands 3 is because I think this is when Pandora is just at its height of being, well, a post-apocalyptic wasteland. It just because it had 2 corporate occupations by Atlas and Hyperion, and well, yes, even though the time span between those 2 events and Borderlands 3 are quite a bit away in length, but I think the scars of Borderlands 1 and 2 are still visible during Borderlands 3. Now, in Borderlands 3, the Crimson Raiders are not in a great state. They pretty much got dog-walked by the COV, and pretty much they're kind of in the same situation in Borderlands 2, just not exactly the same. Just pretty much they're in the same position of having to become guerrilla fighters again. Now, obviously, in order for Pandora to be invaded by the Helldivers, we need to know where Pandora is. So I'm going to put Pandora in between the automaton front and the illuminate front. Now, I'm not putting them inside the automaton and illuminate controlled sectors because, well, that would mean that Super Earth would most likely already know where Pandora is, and considering that all the super corporations, well, maybe not super, the mega corporations are also important to Pandora's history, that means Super Earth would also know where the corporations also are and their worlds. I want to say that Pandora would be in between the sectors but off the grid. So Pandora would be a uncharted world. So in the terms of when this when would this take place in Helldivers terms, I want to say this would take place probably before, well, probably at the beginning of the super offensive towards Cyberstan. Now, in Helldivers, if I remember correctly, space travel, it can be achieved through civil and government means. Now, let's say one day that a civilian spacecraft would accidentally land on Pandora. Now, of course, Pandora would be an uncharted world by Super Earth. Now, I would assume that any civilian that would discover an uncharted world would be required to report the discovery to authorities of Super Earth, either to just civil authorities in general or just straight to the Ministry of Truth. But whatever the case, it needs to be reported. So, of course, the civilian would take as much details as they gather, and they would return to whatever space colony that they came from. Now, obviously, this would be before the direct assault onto Cyberstan, which is a very important event in Helldivers too. But pretty much, the discovery would be recorded by the Ministry of Truth, and they would gather as much information as the civilian would tell the Truth Enforcers or the agents from the Ministry. But, of course, this discovery has to wait to be investigated after Cyberstan because, well, assaulting the enemy capital was very chaotic and was also very fun. Like, you had to be there. So, pretty much, Cyberstan would go, unfortunately, the same, and pretty much everything after Cyberstan would go exactly the same as well. So pretty much we would have, so this investigation would have to wait all the way up until current day. Now, by this time, the Great Galactic War, well, more specifically, the momentum of the war has been slowed down. The automatons are building more mega factories and, well, being annoying as ever. The Terminids are constantly spreading to new worlds and, of course, slowly clawing their way towards Super Earth. And the Illuminates are now releasing exostorms to multiple worlds. Now, the Ministry of Defense has been put under pressure by recent events and, well, ever since the failure to liberate Cyberstan. Now, because of this, I believe the Ministry of Defense has developed a need to find a new edge to this war, so they can probably prevent the impression of Super Earth possibly losing this war. And yes, that fact is unthinkable and will not happen. Hopefully. Now, because of this, I believe the Ministry of Defense has been closely working with the Ministry of Truth closely and trying to find a discovery to help develop a new edge in this war. Now, obviously, the Ministry of Truth would help the Ministry of Defense and for the good of Super Earth. But while the Ministry of Truth is doing that, they would eventually investigate the discovery of Pandora. Now, I believe the details that the civilian gave to the Ministry would be basic details, the geography and the site of Pandora, the possible life forms, but one important detail would come out of the civilian: human life. Now, more importantly, non-Super Earth human life, because the discovery of humans on Pandora that are not civilians of Super Earth is a red flag, because the only other possible humans, if you want to consider humans, are cyborgs. Now, the cyborgs are pretty much the leaders of the automatons. Now, this would give off the impression to the Ministry that they have potentially discovered an uncharted factory world. Now, if you remember, about 2 years ago, that the Helldivers successfully wiped the automatons completely off the map. But eventually, the automatons came back with a massive reserve force from an unknown location, and they took a lot of worlds back, and also took more worlds with them. Now, because of that, we don't really know if that was just a pre-constructed automaton for Legion, or there could be an uncharted factory worlds that we have yet to discover. But regardless of this event would not go forgotten from the history of the Second Galactic War. Let alone this would not be forgotten by the Ministry of Truth. Now, regardless of what the possibilities of this is, Pandora must be investigated by the Ministry of Truth, because if this is what they believe it is, they have to put a stop to a potential uncharted factory world. Now, Ministry of Truth would bring this to the attention of the Ministry of Defense, so they would coordinate a scouting operation on Pandora, so they can see what the whole deal is about. So, if Pandora was a hypothetical uncharted factory world, it could possibly reveal more locations of more factory worlds. So this investigation would be really important to the Ministry of Truth, and obviously real important to the Ministry of Defense. So they would call upon the Helldivers, and they would assemble a small fleet of super destroyers, and they would send them to Pandora. Now they would arrive probably around the ending, well, not the ending of Borderlands 3. They would arrive possibly 2 months before Borderlands 3 would kick off. So they would conduct commando operations, mainly information gathering. Now, what they would discover is pretty much surprising from what the Helldivers would usually expect. Now, they would discover normal settlers, they would see the raiders, and most importantly, they would see very, very undemocratic behavior to their horror. Now, after a brief period of time, the Helldivers would take their super destroyers and they would report back to the Ministry of Truth and the Ministry of Defense. Now, they would also bring back multiple samples because, well, samples are always required when they can get samples. But other than that, the Ministry of Truth would review all the information and they would realize that this is a very momentous discovery, because the Ministry of Truth would discover the weaponry of Pandora, and more importantly, the weaponry of the borderlands. And the Ministry of Defense would see that the weapons that are within the borderlands is exactly the edge that they need. So the Ministry of Truth would call upon all the other ministries so they can talk about potentially using Pandora to Super Earth's intent. Now, the discovery of Pandora would also pique the interest of the Ministry of Science and the Ministry of Expansion. Now, obviously, since Pandora is an uncharted world, and more importantly, an unclaimed world by Super Earth, they would feel the need to obviously colonize it. Now, obviously, they would also wonder, how did Pandora construct such weapons? Because the weapons from the borderlands and the weapons within the territories of Super Earth are different. Because yes, the railgun that the Helldivers use are slightly similar to the laser and energy-based weapons within the borderlands, but they obviously function different. But another thing that piques the interest of the ministries is, of course, the scar upon Pandora itself. And more importantly, I'm talking about the Iridium Blight. Now, each world that Super Earth controls has their own resources and also their own special effects that support Super Earth and its colonies. Now, obviously, the ministries would look at Pandora and wonder what could Pandora offer, because unknowing to them, Doll years ago already basically drained Pandora of most of its natural resources. But with the opening of the Vault of the Destroyer and the rise of Iridium, Iridium is now one of the last major resources that Pandora has to offer. But luckily for Super Earth, Hyperion did not completely drain it all yet, because that is one of the many unfinished things that Jack failed to do. Now, obviously, the Ministry of Expansion wants to get onto Pandora quickly as possible so they can harvest some of the iridium so they could use it for the benefits for Super Earth, and of course increase more productivity, because the E711 is helping the efforts in Super Earth and also the efforts within the war. But if they would unlock the true potential of Iridium, it could really turn the tide. Now, the Ministry of Science, of course, would want to study the intriguing and also dangerous life forms that delve within Pandora. Now, each other ministry would have their own reasons to explore Pandora, but most in unison, they would all be in favor of colonizing Pandora. Now, obviously, Super Earth can multitask with worlds, but with the current state of things, they would need to try and prevent Pandora from being seen by the eyes of the enemies. Now, since I placed Pandora in between the Illuminate and Automaton fronts, Super Earth is going to have to quickly gain major control of Pandora. If not complete control, they need to at least gain most control over the land, because the last thing that they would want is the Illuminate and the Automatons and trying to take Pandora while they are doing it as well. So with this, they would of course start preparing for the invasion and colonization of Pandora. Now, this would be considered an indigenous campaign, but before the Helldivers could step foot upon the sands of Pandora, they first need to claim the following civilization that neighbors Pandora, and that is Elphis. Now, Elphis is Pandora's moon. Now, normally people would skip over Elphis because of, well, it's not the size of Pandora or holds that much relevance. But if you pay close attention, Elphis is and can be considered just as important as Pandora. Now, Elphis has settlers upon it, but its main city upon the moon is, of course, Concordia. Now, Elphis is mainly explored during the pre-sequel when Jack was, well, trying to liberate Helios from Dahl and, of course, well, his rise to power. But other than that, we don't really know what Concordia was really up to during Borderlands 2, and well, again, I haven't played Borderlands 4, so I don't know if they expanded upon the lore of Concordia there, but I would like to assume that after the pre-sequel, Concordia was Hyperionized, then after Hyperion left Pandora, just Concordia was just left to their own endeavors. But pretty much, the presence of the Helldivers in their investigation would not go completely unnoticed, because I think a fleet of unknown ships would probably be spotted by the moon and, well, seen from space. So Super Earth would rally their sea forces and, of course, the Helldiver Corps. Now, the main thing that they do not want when they're trying to take Pandora is to have it end like Cyberstan. Now, Cyberstan and Pandora are not on the same level because, well, Cyberstan was a part of a major offensive, and, well, they were trying to keep the momentum, but Pandora doesn't have the same gauntlets of worlds and, well, operations that Cyberstan had. But in order for the Helldivers and, well, Super Earth in general to take Pandora, I'm going to say that in order for them to take Pandora, they must not have as many casualties like Cyberstan. So they would be put on a reserve limit. So that would be the main thing for the Helldivers in order to colonize Pandora. Now, back to Elphis. Now, the Helldivers would need to take control of Elphis so they could use it as a launching ground to Pandora. So, now, the thing with Elphis is Elphis is not as dangerous as Pandora, but it still does have its dangers. It has the scavs, it has the crags, I think they're called, but other than that and the occasional meteorites that fall down onto its surface, it's really not as dangerous as Pandora. Now, once the Helldivers would rally and the sea forces would follow behind them, they would proceed to invade Elphas. Now, I think the main control point of Elphas would be Concordia, and well, maybe some other abandoned doll sites like the factory. But other than that, if Concordia falls under their control, Elphas is practically theirs. Now, knowing, well, seeing Elphas in general, the Helldivers is just going to take it with ease. So pretty much, the Helldivers and the Super Destroyer fleet is just going to show up, and well, pretty much the citizens of Concordia can't really do anything about it. Now, there is the law enforcement wondering why is there an army here, but well, with their gear that I can just imagine and the equipment that the law enforcement would have within Concordia would not be on par with a Helldiver, because, well, I don't see the citizens of Elphas and Concordia having their own super destroyers, so yeah, nothing they can really do there. So the Helldivers would quickly take control of all of Elphas. Now, the scabs would either be hunted down or be arrested or just fall under occupation like the rest of the citizens on Elphas. So pretty much, once the Helldivers would take control of Elphas, they would begin one final stage of recon. Now, they would gain control of the EchoNet. Now, what is the EchoNet? It's pretty much the internet within the Borderlands. Now, I would believe that the internet within Super Earth and its territories is pretty much really different from, well, the EchoNet in general, but other than that, Super Earth and the Helldivers would have no idea what is going on within the Borderlands. They don't know its full history. They don't really know anything, because the most people who do know about the Borderlands is the Ministry of Truth and all the other ministries that have been told by the Ministry of Truth. So, but pretty much they would start limiting the information that leaks out of Elphas. Now, pretty much the Helldivers wants to keep their presence down low as much as possible, even though a large Super Destroyer fleet that's orbiting behind Elphas could really go unnoticed, even though it's very noticeable. But regardless, they would start gaining information about the Borderlands. Now pretty much, since the Helldivers are going to colonize Pandora, they're obviously going to colonize Elphas as well. Now, with control of Concordia, they would start instating the laws of Super Earth, but since they just colonized it, they would put martial law in place. Now, any law enforcement that was in Concordia, they would have been politely let go, and they would be replaced by either military police or whatever law enforcement that Super Earth and the Helldivers would put in place. Now, given some time, the presence of the Helldivers are going to leak out to the Borderlands, either just by a settler just slipping past the Super Destroyers, or just some EchoNet influencer that so happens to find out and just react about it. But regardless, the Helldivers would prepare the real invasion of Pandora. Now, since this invasion is taking place during Borderlands 3, the The Helldivers would arrive just probably while the Crimson Raiders are at Promethea helping Reese and Atlas. Now, Tyrene and Troy are obviously now handling a front on Promethea and trying to get to the vault of the Rampager. The Helldivers would immediately make their presence known when they would start deploying on Pandora. Now, a lot of Helldivers would deploy onto the Iridium Blights and to many of the old Hyperion sites, but a lot of Helldivers would also land in COV territory. Now, they would start spreading democracy and, well, pretty much get things ready for whenever Seath would move in to take over. But this wouldn't really completely sit well with the COV. Now, the COV is led by Tyrene and Troy Calypso, the twin gods. Now, Tyrene and Troy are sirens. Now, what are sirens? It's basically, how do I describe sirens? Basically people, mostly female, but Troy is an exception, but basically people with the ability to use super magic powers. It's something like that. But pretty much they would get news that an army of space marines, no, not those space marines, but an unknown army is starting to take over Pandora. Now since the COV already has one corporate army allied and somewhat under their influence, why not try and get a second army under their influence? Now, here's the thing you gotta understand about Helldivers, and well, Super Earth in general. If it's not democratic, they are not going to listen. Like, even the smallest amount of anything that doesn't sound freedom, or well, speak America in general, yeah, it's not gonna sit well with them. Now, obviously the news would also spread to, well, the Crimson Raiders, but Lilith would probably decide that the best time to deal with this is whenever they cross that bridge, because, well, they need to get to the vault on Promethea. So, as the Helldivers are spreading managed democracy, Tyrene would take the chance to try and recruit the Helldivers to their side, because, well, the Helldivers are starting to dig into her own territory, and she really does not want to have a lot of angry bandits question why did complete strangers take their home, and pretty much beg the twin gods to correct it. Now, Tyrene would say that she would try to recruit the Helldivers by saying that all the Iridium and all the vaults are technically her birthright, and also the birthright of her brother, but mainly hers. But pretty much she would try and get the Helldivers by trying to make them buy into the whole COV advertisement. Now, the one and only thing that the Helldivers are loyal to is freedom, and more importantly, managed democracy to fight against tyranny. Now, obviously, they are going to discover that the COV is a cult. Now, a cult is a very controlling group. Now, since it's a controlling group, it's obviously a threat to democracy. Now, negotiations, well, attempted negotiations, mostly by Tyrene, are going to fall completely flat. And eventually, knowing how some raiders act and behave, fighting will eventually break out between the two groups. Now, since the COV and the Helldivers are going to be fighting each other, we are going to need to compare their armies. Now, before they start fighting, we're going to obviously compare the two. Now, the Helldivers have their base armor, and they also have their base weapons, either being assault rifles, SMG, shotguns, incendiary weapons, and energy weapons. They also have special weapons and backpacks, and also boosters. Now, obviously we cannot forget about the stratagems, but the backpacks can either range from teleportation, giving the Helldiver shields, and the one true flag, and also helping to supply a squad of Helldivers. The special weapons can either be, well, the Wasp, from being shooting miniature rockets, and can also, well, be even larger flamethrower, and well, pretty much the base weapons, just on a much higher scale. But one of the main important things that the Helldivers have to their disposal is their Super Destroyer. Now, the Super Destroyer can act as support and also orbital artillery. Now, the Super Destroyers can give the Helldivers tanks, recon vehicles if they need it. They also deploy their special weapons when the Helldivers request it, but also orbital bombardments, orbital lasers, and also orbital napalm. Pretty much in everything, the Super Destroyer has the entire American arsenal in one spaceship. So, with that, we can move to the COV. Now, the COV is compared of multiple raiders. Now, some raiders are not that equipped, but other raiders are very equipped. Now, since some raiders are, well, former workers from Dahl, but I don't know if those are the same raiders as from Borderlands 1, since this is Borderlands 3. But whatever the case, they are armed to the teeth. Now, in the Borderlands, people have shields. Now, shields are just basically miniature devices that a person can have on them, and it pretty much makes you a bullet sponge until the shield depletes. Now, when the shield depletes, you obviously can die from getting shot. So, besides that, when the shield would run out, you will obviously need to take cover until it recharges. Now, knowing some shields are better than others, I would believe that most of the raiders would have these pretty decent shields, but obviously they're not infinite lasting. So, also, another thing that the COV has is, well, the weaponry of the Borderlands. Now, the main thing about their weaponry is that some of the guns have elemental effects. Now, yes, the Helldivers also have elemental weapons to a certain extent, but they most definitely do not have the elemental effects to the extent of the COV's weapons. Now, yes, I could describe each effect of each certain elements, but knowing how well the BO1 armor reacts to, well, the elemental environments within the Galactic War and against each faction, I think the armor would be just as vulnerable to the weapons within the Borderlands, so I don't really feel a need to explain that much into detail. But I think the most fatal element against the Helldivers would be either the corrosive element or the incinerative element, which is obviously fire. But besides the elemental effects, there is the anointed, I think that's what they're called, but there are these raiders. Now, these raiders basically have, well, super abilities that were given to them by Tyrene and Troy, but I do believe that it takes some process of time to create them. So unless Tyrene and Troy decides to, well, mass produce them, I don't think they would be seen in large numbers. Now, I know that I'm currently talking about the COV, but I'm gonna dial back to the Helldivers real quick. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about the Helldivers is that they do have the DSS. Now, the DSS, or the Democracy Space Station, is a support space station that supports the Helldivers and their campaigns across different worlds. Now, recently, the DSS has obtained and constructed a part of the station called, the Star of Peace. Now, what does the Star of Peace do? Well, it pacifies worlds. And if you're still curious on how it pacifies worlds, you can go on the internet and look up Penta. Now, that's what the DSS is. Now, I'm not going to be giving the DSS to the Helldivers because, well, unless the fight grows too desperate, I don't think the DSS will get involved in Pandora. Now, I think that would be where I stop comparing the two factions. Now, since the two armies are fighting on Pandora, we are going to need to know what type of operations the Helldivers would be conducting on Pandora. Now, in Helldivers 2, each world has an operation and certain missions. Some operations are the same and some operations are just exclusive to certain fronts in the war. Now, since Pandora has Iridium, and well, since the Ministry of Expansion really wants Pandora, I think the type of operations on Pandora would be geological surveys, Iridium extraction, and of course confiscation of the weaponry within Pandora. But other than that, I think the only other operations that would be conducted on Pandora would be spreading Mana's democracy and liberation. Now, knowing the operations that the Helldivers would be conducting, we can now get into the story aspect. So, fighting, of course, would break out between the COV and the Helldivers, but when the Crimson Raiders would get to Eden, that's when the major fighting would actually break out. So when the COV and the Helldivers going out in an all-out war, the COV would of course have the upper hand in the beginning of the invasion of Pandora, but the moment when the Helldivers would start gaining ground and start gaining traction, that is when the tide would turn against the COV. Yes, the COV would give the Helldivers quite a number of casualties, but the only reason that the COV won't collapse greatly would be because of their weaponry and of course the fellow anointed. Now, the Helldivers would of course gain enough ground where the sea forces can move in. Now, I did mention Seaf, but I did not mention what they are. Now, the Helldivers act as paratroopers. Now, the Helldivers would of course land inside enemy territory and of course would start getting the ball rolling for the army. Now, Seaf acts as Super Earth's primary army, air force, and I personally believe that they also act as Super Earth's navy. Now, so when Seaf would of course land on Pandora, they would of course begin multiple assaults and of course start gaining ground, so the ministries can of course do their post jobs after Super Earth would claim Pandora. Now, obviously, the only way that the CLV can drive off the Helldivers is if they manage to deplete the Helldivers reserves. So Tyreen and Troy would of course be multitasking between the Crimson Raiders and of course the Helldivers. Now, of course, the presence of the Helldivers would of course affect the story of Borderlands 3. Now, I forget, I believe it's Eden 6, so the COV on Eden 6 would mainly be invaded by the COV with the transport technology and ships thanks to Madawan. Now, because of the Helldivers, the amount of COV and bandits on Eden 6 would be greatly reduced. Now, because of this, the Crimson Raiders would, of course, assist the Jacobs family, and of course, the quest on Eden 6 much quicker. But on Pandora would, of course, turn into a complete war zone. Even worse, and the war zone would, of course, be worse than the time that Atlas was on Pandora and the time that Pandora was invaded by Hyperion. Now, since Pandora is completely in an all-out war, Pandora is not only inhabited by raiders. Now, yes, Pandora is a wasteland, but it's not a complete wasteland. There are civilizations and towns throughout Pandora, but during this invasion, I think that the towns and cities would be given two choices. Now the choices would be, would they rather live under Super Earth or live under the presence of the COV. Now I believe that the people who don't want to be constantly harassed by the CLV would join Super Earth, and hoping that they won't be treated like Hyperion did with other towns. Now, for the people who want to live under the presence of the CLV, they would side with the CLV and hoping that they won't be constantly harassed by them. But I wouldn't put it past Tyreen and Troy to demand constant tribute from said towns. Now, since there are people that are not bandits and raiders on Pandora, I would also believe that there are either mercenaries and militias throughout Pandora. Now, I believe that there are militias that are acting as neutral forces that are just either protecting their towns or just fighting for whoever pays them more. Now, because of this brings me to a certain group on Pandora. Now, from what I remember, there is a group called the B Team. Now, the B Team consists of 3 members. Formerly 4, but the 3 members are Mordecai, Brick, and of course Tiny Tina. Now, Brick and Mordecai were 2 Vault Hunters from Borderlands 1, and yes, they were Vault Hunters in Borderlands 2, but they weren't, well, the main characters in Borderlands 2. Now, for whatever reason, they formed the B Team. I forgot why, but I'm sure there was a reason. So pretty much the B Team during Borderlands 3 were helping the Crimson Raiders fight against the CLV. Now, since this is during when the Crimson Raiders were on Eden, the B Team would be on Eden, but I think it was Brick who ended up getting captured and arrested on Eden by the COV. So the B team and the Crimson Raiders would be trying to take the prison, but the B team would of course tell Lilith and the Raiders about the war on Pandora. Now, Lilith would not be too pleased to hear that the Helldivers are reawakening old Hyperion sites. Now, since the Helldivers are raiding and extracting iridium from the Iridium Blight, they would of course somehow come across either ingredients or machines that turn iridium into slag. Now, slag was an element that was, I think, was specifically exclusive in Borderlands 2. Now, the effects of slag is complicated, well, not extremely complicated, but it's kind of hard to explain for some people. Now, slag would, so if you are infected by slag, you wouldn't be damaged by slag, but slag would increase the damage of other elemental effects like fire, ice, pretty much. If you are, pretty much if you're affected by slag, you would be more vulnerable to different elemental effects. So because of this, the Helldivers would of course decide, you know what, slag would be very valuable in the Galactic War. So they would of course start making more slag. So because of this, slag would make a return in Borderlands 3. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Now, since the Helldivers are confiscating weapons on Pandora, wouldn't that mean that they would come across a certain gun? Now, for those who don't know what the Handsome Jackhammer is, now the Handsome Jackhammer is a reference to Tales from the Borderlands. Now, how is it a reference? Well, it has AI Jack inside the gun. Now, pretty much, last I checked, there was a theory that states that after Tales from the Borderlands, Reese took what remains of Jack's AI, and Reese would trap Jack inside the Handsome Jackhammer, so no one else could, well, be tricked or at least go through what Reese did with Jack during Tales. So pretty much ever since then, Jack has been trapped within the Handsome Jackhammer. Now, of course, that's a theory, but that's one of the popular theories that roamed that I was aware of. So Jack would, of course, be stuck in the gun. Now, eventually, the Helldivers would, of course, come across this gun, either from confiscating it from a raider stash or, of course, from a body of a raider. So, when the Helldivers would, of course, find the gun, they would, of course, be greeted with the voice of Jack. Now, Jack would, of course, say, well, he doesn't recognize the Helldivers or from a corporation that makes the type of armor that they wear. So, of course, Jack would try and convince the Helldivers to free him. So, the Helldivers would, of course, either take this gun to a truth enforcer or to a higher up. Now, since the Helldivers have been, well, conquering Pandora, they would of course be gathering much more information than what they have been gathering previously. Now, since iridium has been mainly mined massively during the Hyperion presence on Pandora, more importantly during Jack's reign, they would of course know about Hyperion and everything they did. Now, since Jack is inside the gun, obviously they would take it to an engineering lab or wherever they would most likely take most of the guns. But since this is the handsome jackhammer and not a usual gun in the usual sense on some of the different weapons within the Borderlands, they would of course try and pry Jack out of the gun. Now since the Helldivers and Super Earth are gathering the weapons from the Borderlands so they can, well, make it their own, I would believe that they would be reverse engineering the weaponry from the Borderlands so they can understand and create guns, the type of guns for, well, their own war. Now, since they are going to remove Jack from the handsome jackhammer, we must understand how they would deal with Jack. Now, considering that the automaton fronts are, well, robots, and robots are artificial intelligence, I believe Super Earth would have developed some sort of restraining measures for AI. Now, since Jack is not, well, the traditional AI, I believe that's when the scientists on Super Earth or wherever that they would take Jack, they would of course try and restrain Jack as much as possible, but they won't completely restrain him. So now the reason that they would restrain Jack would be, well, if you play Tales from the Borderlands, you would know exactly what Jack is capable of when he is, well, in full power. Episode 5. But, so pretty much once they would at least have Jack restrained to the point where he would be forced to cooperate with Super Earth, Jack would be put under questioning. Now, pretty much, I believe, so obviously the Ministry of Truth would be, of course, in charge of dealing with Jack. Now, they would question Jack they would want Jack to reveal everything about all of the Hyperion facilities on Pandora, and most importantly, his old Iridian mine. Pretty much every Hyperion secret and, well, everything that he knows about Hyperion from his time. So when it comes down to it, Jack would be given two options. Either A, the Ministry of Truth and the scientists of Super Earth could tear apart his code until they find what they need, or Jack could willingly reveal what they want to know, and they would decide what to do with him after. Now, Jack would, of course, choose the better option because, well, he has no idea, and, well, with the restraining, he has no power to, well, do anything against the Ministry and Super Earth thanks to the restrainments. So Jack would tell them about Hyperion and their facilities and, of course, the Iridian mines, but he would also tell them a few other details like Atlas, the Crimson Raiders, and, of course, maybe his casino, which we will get to later. Now, after Jack would tell them what they want to know, they would decide what to do with Jack. Now, obviously, they're not going to return Jack to Hyperion or Atlas because, well, they don't want anything else to interrupt their occupation and, of course, their colonization on Pandora. Now, they don't really know how trustworthy Atlas is yet, so they're obviously not going to risk giving Jack to them. So, of course, they would decide to make Jack their newest property. So Jack would become property of Super Earth and the Ministry of Truth. So, pretty much, Jack is now an unpaid employee for the Ministry under very, very tight supervision. Now, obviously, Jack would, of course, try and get on the good side of its employees. Now, the question is, would all of them buy Jack's story? Now, I believe maybe the lower employees and the lower workers for the Ministry and the lower workers for Super Earth would probably buy his story. But the upper management and, of course, all the higher ups and maybe a lot of the middle, well, maybe some of the middle class won't be too, well, they wouldn't really buy into it as much as Jack would anticipate. So pretty much thanks to the ideology of Super Earth and their super patriotism, Jack wouldn't really have a lot of people under his thumb. So with that, Jack would, of course, be stuck with the Ministry of Truth. Now, so back on Pandora, the Helldivers would, of course, be fighting the CLV. Now, since this is at the third and maybe final act during Borderlands 3, I think the CLV would, of course, be starting to lose heavily against the Helldivers. Now, I would believe that either Tyrene or Troy would, of course, go back to Promethea and Eden to, of course, gather up any bandits that have been left behind. Now, pretty much, the reason why the CLV is losing is because, well, yes, they are an army, but they are not organized as an army. More importantly, they're not being treated as an army. Now, pretty much, yes, the CLV has managed to drive back the Crimson Raiders multiple times, but that was only because they outnumbered the Raiders. And of course, another contributing factor to this was because, well, Lilith lost a lot of her heavy hitters after Borderlands 2. Yes, Krieg did come back for maybe like one mission. Yes, Maya did come back, but we all know what happens to her. But pretty much, unlike the Raiders, the Helldivers were trained enough, and of course, they've been given super destroyers, which the CLV does not have. Yes, the CLV does have Tyrene and Troy Calypso, and along with their Siren abilities, but Tyrene and Troy are only two people, so they cannot be everywhere at once. Now, I don't think pretty much some Raiders are combat effective, but some are not military effective to the point where they might be a challenge to Seath or the Helldivers. Now, because of this, Tyrene and Troy are trying to turn the situation around, because now the Helldivers are pretty much either right at their doorstep or, of course, right about to be there. Now, eventually, the Crimson Raiders are going to return to Pandora. Now, since the final act during Borderlands 3 takes place on Pandora and maybe on that other world for a brief moment, but mainly Pandora. Now, the question is, would the Raiders be allies with the Helldivers? I'm going to be honest, no, I do not think that they would be allies. Now, I think that they would be mutual partners during the fight against the CLV, but true allies it's not going to be the case. Now, one of the reasons for this is, well, their name, the Crimson Raiders. I don't think that's going to help the fact that the Helldivers are already fighting Raiders, and, well, I don't think that they would trust a group that has Raiders in their name. So, and also, since the Helldivers are trying to mine Iridium, I wouldn't put it past them to eventually discover the vaults. Now, obviously, when they would discover the vaults, Super Earth is also going to want the vault, so they wouldn't also appreciate the fact that they might have vault hunters trying to take things from the vaults that Super Earth would extremely want. So pretty much, I don't believe that they would fight immediately, but the chance that they might fight each other is up there. Lilith would instruct everyone to not make the forces of Super Earth another enemy unless they have valid reason. Now, pretty much now the COV has the Raiders and of course the Helldivers right at their doorstep. Now, the story of Borderlands, now pretty much the missions on Pandora would of course be normal, but just with the assault of the Helldivers in the background, and maybe some Super Earth forces on the ground and encountering the Vault Hunters as they do their missions. Now, I think on the terms of side quests and missions, I think maybe one mission might include the Helldivers because, well, I think Tiny Tina, or I think Tina in general, would just want to at least try and get the ability to use a super destroyer. Now, would it happen? No. Now, pretty much I believe that when a Helldiver is unfortunately killed in action, I think that their command over the Super Destroyer would of course be disconnected. So yes, Tina could get an armor of the Helldivers, but that wouldn't mean that he would gain control over a Super Destroyer. Now, on the topic of Vault Hunters, I think Krieg would rejoin the Crimson Raiders. Now, why do I think Krieg would rejoin? Now, since the Helldivers are fighting the COV, and since the COV consists of many psychos, I think that the Helldivers would, of course, mistake Krieg for being a part of the COV. So, I think because of the hostility, I think Krieg would, of course, be driven to join the Raiders. Now, I think this would be a sensible course of action. So, Lilith and the Raiders would, of course, be happy that Krieg would rejoin. But I think Krieg would, of course, either be put on the sidelines or, of course, only be join missions where they directly assault the COV. Now, obviously, Krieg would either get the news about Maya's death, but I don't know when he would get it, so let's just assume that he would receive the news when he rejoins. So obviously he would not be too happy about that. So the mission, so pretty much the story, so pretty much the main story would of course continue as usual. Now, eventually, they would of course get to the Cathedral of the Twin Gods. Pretty much, this is when the Raiders would of course directly try and face off against the Calypso Twins. Now, pretty much, since this is I don't think this is the capital of the COV, but I think it can be considered. So, since they are unofficially since they are attacking the unofficial capital of the COV, I think this would be the one and only time the Helldivers would assist the Crimson Raiders. Now, by what I mean assist is pretty much they would of course encounter each other when they're both assaulting the cathedral. So pretty much, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but the friend part is being, of course, a mutual ally. So pretty much as the COV would, of course, defend the cathedral, the Vault Hunters are going to eventually carve their way to Troy. Now, I think Troy can take on a few Helldivers, but with the combined force of 4 Vault Hunters and an entire squad of Helldivers, I don't think he's winning this now. So pretty much Troy would still lose, and pretty much Tyrene would of course do the same thing. So pretty much the same thing would happen, of course. So pretty much the Vault Hunters and Lilith would of course be knocked out, but the vault that was standing there would of course open, and the Helldivers are going to raid the vault. So pretty much while the raiders are unconscious, the Helldivers would of course be playing Tomb Raider and pretty much strip everything that is not nailed down that is inside that vault. Now, after raiding the Great Vault, the Vault Hunters would of course make their way to wherever this SOS message is coming out. Now, pretty much it would head towards the world that I cannot pronounce the name of. But in quick summary, they would of course go off to that world, meet the first Vault Hunter, Typhon de Leon, and pretty much they would try and stop the opening of Pandora. Now, I forgot to mention, after the death of Troy, Tyrene would of course reveal that Pandora itself is a vault keeping away, well, not keeping away, trapping inside the Destroyer. Now, the Destroyer was the vault monster from Borderlands 1, but basically, if the Destroyer gets released, pretty much every world in the universe is at risk of getting destroyed. Now, obviously, this wouldn't happen if it did, if the Helldivers would stop the Destroyer. Now remember, this video is sponsored by the Ministry of Truth. No treasonous thoughts allowed. Okay, but all seriousness, if the Destroyer gets released, almost the entire universe would get destroyed. But now Tyrene has the loose hope of, if she would release the Destroyer, she could of course take its power and of course become God herself. But pretty much Typhon de Leon and the rest of the Crimson Raiders would of course try and stop the opening of Pandora. But of course Tyrene would of course not allow this, so she would of course stop this, and of course, well, her father would of course sacrifice himself to attempt to stop Tyrene. But of course, it wouldn't fully work, so pretty much this would lead to the final boss fight. Now, pretty much Tyrene would of course merge with a part of the Destroyer, and of course Tyrene would of course become Tyrene the Destroyer. Now, there's 2 ways this boss fight could play out. Now, either A, it plays out normally, and of course the Vault Hunters would defeat Tyrene, or 2, the Vault Hunters would of course destroy Tyrene, but since Tyrene of course merged with the Destroyer, of course the Helldivers are going to see this, and pretty much Tyrene would of course get a orbital laser straight through her. But either way, Tyrene is going to be defeated. Now, even with the defeat of the Twin Gods, Pandora is still opening. So in the end, Lilith would of course sacrifice herself and hold Elphys in place with her power to stop all of Pandora from cracking open and the destruction of the entire universe. Now, pretty much, I am aware I skipped over a few important details over the final act, and I'm sorry about it, but it's kind of because I am going off of all of this off the top of my head. So if there's anything that you're wondering if I missed, there is plenty of other channels you can who can describe it more better than I can, but pretty much in simplicity, in the final act, the Twin Gods try and defeat the Crimson Raiders themselves, but they would of course fail, and of course Tyreen of course would try and merge herself with the Destroyer so she can become a goddess, but of course she would of course fail. But since the Helldivers are here, their plans would of course fail more miserably, and pretty much in the end, Lilith would of course sacrifice herself and to keep hold Elphys, because Elphys is Pandora's vault key, so she would of course stop Elphys from either colliding into Pandora. I forget how it was working, but so she would of course go up to Elphys and of course sacrifice herself so Pandora will not be destroyed. Now, we are in the stage of the aftermath. Now, pretty much, since the Crimson Raiders lost their head leader, and pretty much since they are now suffering from the post-war effects against the COV, what are they going to do now? Now, pretty much the Helldivers are still going to be cleaning up what remains of the COV. So, pretty much they would be wondering, okay, so the COV is gone, but the Helldivers are, well, mining Iridium, and pretty much reawakening all of Hyperion sites. So would they be able to do anything about it, and anything against the Helldivers? I'm going to be honest, no, they cannot. So pretty much the reason I'm saying this is, 1, they lost their leader, 2, yes, they are Vault Hunters, but Super Earth is not like the corporations. They cannot just find a head honcho and destroy the head honcho, and the entire army would go away. That is not how Super Earth works, and more importantly, that is not how their army works. The Vault Hunters can, of course, kill as many Helldivers as they can, but in the end, they're not going to leave. So pretty much, unfortunately for the Crimson Raiders, they can't do anything about the Helldivers. Now, they can, of course, become guerrilla fighters, but if they were to fight against Super Earth right after the events of Borderlands 3, it's not going to end well for them. In fact, it's going to end horribly. Because if they were to do that, Sanctuary would, of course, be tracked down and pretty much be destroyed in space, because it's one ship against an armada of super destroyers. So pretty much, they're just going to have to hope for the best that Super Earth is not like Hyperion, Atlas, or any of the other corporations. Now, since the Twin Gods and of course, well, the heavily crippled Raiders are now in the state that they are, what are the Helldivers are going to do with Pandora? Now, what I believe what happened to the COV after the death of the Twin Gods is, just like every big faction, when of course the leaders would of course either be destroyed or just gone, I believe the COV would of course fracture into many separate successor factions, either fighting for legitimacy, whether their legitimacy is forged or not. But pretty much they would of course try and claim, so pretty much these new factions would of course claim themselves to be the real successor to the COV, while simultaneously fighting the Helldivers, but also fighting themselves. So the death of the Twin Gods would be the final nail in the coffin for the COV. So pretty much, the Super Earth Armed Forces and the Helldivers would of course finish off what remains of the COV. Now, with the COV gone, the Helldivers would of course start properly colonizing Pandora. Now, I believe that Super Earth would repair any damaged infrastructure and well start building more colonies. Would of course start building their colonies on Pandora. But pretty much, Super Earth is going to actually do what Hyperion advertised, what they wanted to do for Pandora. So Super Earth would actually start fixing Pandora. Now, I believe Opportunity will of course be repaired, just Opportunity would of course be risen up again, just without all of the Hyperion propaganda. All of the Handsome Jack statues would of course be replaced with Helldiver statues and monuments. And pretty much, I think Opportunity would be renamed to Greater Opportunity, because everything is greater and super under Super Earth. But pretty much, I think, but with Super Earth actually colonizing Pandora, the bandit problem won't be fully solved, but the bandits will not be bad as they were. So pretty much any remaining bandits will of course either just become highway robbers or just petty thieves, or just at worst just guerrilla groups that would eventually be hunted down. Now, Iridium mines would of course be fixed, and of course would start extracting iridium, while other foundries would of course continue making slag. Now, every other town and city would of course be subjugated under Super Earth. Now, the towns that sided with Super Earth would of course be given good treatment, but any towns that sided with the COV would of course be scrutinized for making that decision, and of course be placed under martial law and would be put under heavy supervision. But either way, almost every Pandora citizen would of course have to be registered as a new citizen under Super Earth. Now, the citizens who do have weapons would of course be allowed to keep their weapons as long as they follow the regulations under Super Earth. But in the end, Pandora would of course be made civil, and of course Pandora and all of its wilds would be tamed. Now, the news of Pandora being tamed would of course not go unheard of, because, well, this would actually be a major surprise for the Borderlands, because the corporations would of course be shocked that a complete newcomer has taken control and also colonized Pandora. Now, the most jealous of this would obviously be Hyperion, but I don't think any of them would of course try and take Pandora yet. But pretty much anyone who still does not want to live under Super Earth would of course leave Pandora and go wherever else. But since the Helldivers have been reverse engineering the weaponry of the Borderlands, they would of course figure out how to make weaponry just like the Borderlands. So this would be a miracle in disguise, because this would not mean that Super Earth would have to be reliant on any other companies. Now, with all that said, I think this leads us to the DLCs. Now, the DLCs for Borderlands 3, I don't think the Helldivers would majorly change all of them except one, but pretty much, I think, so pretty much for the Krieg DLC, the Hammerlock DLC, and that other DLC would not be changed. Just the only difference is that there would be mentions of the Helldivers, just they would not be seen there. I think the most mentions of the Helldivers would of course be in the Psycho Krieg DLC, because, well, it would probably involve the Helldivers either chasing Krieg or just Krieg fighting the Helldivers in general. But pretty much other than that, those three DLCs would not change at all. But the DLC that would most change would be the Handsome Jackpot. Now, remember when Handsome Jack fell under control of Super Earth? Now, since Jack's AI is being forced to work with the Ministry of Truth and Super Earth a whole, they would of course be occasionally still questioning Jack if Jack intentionally left out anything that he forgot to tell Super Earth's officials. Now, one of these things that Jack would eventually mention is his casino. Now, pretty much, they wouldn't be interested in the casino part, but if you play the DLC, you would of course remember that Jack's casino is not only a casino, but it's also a factory to create more loader bots. Now, this would of course pique the interest of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Truth, because one of the things that Hyperion is known for is well, I forgot the word in Borderlands, but it's pretty much digital construction. Now, pretty much, if I remember correctly, digital construction is the is the form of creating something without its resources, like completely fabricated from nothing. I don't even know how to explain it, but pretty much, this would of course save a lot of time for the Ministry of Truth and of course Super Earth in general. Well, not the Ministry of Truth, but it would also save a lot of time for the Ministry of Defense, is what I forgot to say. So pretty much they would decide that the casino has to become Super Earth's property. Now, the casino is not only under the eyes of Super Earth, but the casino has been in the sights of Mad Moxie. Now, Moxie used to date Jack. Now, since Moxie used to date Jack, Moxie had an idea to create a space casino. But pretty much one day Jack and Moxie had a falling out, and pretty much Jack stole the plans of the casino from Moxie, and pretty much that's how Jack built his casino. So pretty much, yes, Jack built the casino, but it was Moxie who originally created the idea and the plan. So pretty much Jack stole the casino from Moxie, and pretty much Moxie wants the casino back under her control. So how the story of this DLC would go and this what if is pretty much Moxie would of course rally the Vault Hunters for her heist, but when they would get there, they would be greeted by the sight of a fleet of super destroyers. Now, obviously, Moxie's going to wonder, okay, why are they even here? But on the side of the Helldivers and Super Earth, pretty much since Jack revealed that he has a giant robot factory inside his casino, obviously Super Earth wants the factory and the casino. So pretty much they would take this opportunity to use so they can use Jack for a test run. So pretty much since Jack is being forced to work with Super Earth, they're going to see how cooperative and how well their restraints are. So pretty much the Helldivers are going to take Jack and they're going to go to the casino, and Jack is going to basically use his artificial powers to bend the casino to the will of the Helldivers. Now, since I believe that Super Earth can develop pretty advanced restraints for AI, I think Jack's AI would of course be under the control of the Helldivers, and they would of course take the casino. Now, pretty much. Now, I think how the story would fully play out is is that Moxie and the Vault Hunters would of course get to the casino first, and they would do like pretty much the beginning of the DLC story would of course play out as normal. But when they would of course start getting to the second part of the story, that's when the Super Destroyers would show up. Now Moxie would be surprised, but also wondering, okay, so why are the Helldivers at my casino? So pretty much the Helldivers would reveal that they have found Jack's AI, and pretty much the casino is now the property of Super Earth and of course everything that is inside. So pretty much Moxie would not be happy about this because not only that he lost the casino to Jack, but he does not want to lose the casino a second time, but to Super Earth. So pretty much, well, not a second time, but he doesn't want to lose it a second time in general. So I'm sorry, you guys know what I'm talking about. But pretty much, Jack would of course. So pretty much the Helldivers would of course enter the casino with the assistance of Jack, and pretty much Jack would of course override the security system, but Jack is also being put under check thanks to the restraints from Super Earth. So pretty much the entire security of the casino would be override, and the entire casino would of course be bent to the will of the Helldivers. So pretty much this would make everything easy for Moxie and the Vault Hunters, but unfortunately this doesn't mean that they would get the casino. Now, the Helldivers and the Super Destroyers, well, so the Super Destroyers would of course keep everyone and would of course keep space travel in check, so they can make sure that Sanctuary itself and the Raiders won't have any funny ideas of attacking the casino or the Super Destroyers. But pretty much the Helldivers would of course kick everyone in the casino out, like everyone is going to be kicked out. So pretty much, now yes, Pretty Boy, I think that's his name, I'm pretty sure that it is his name. So pretty much, yes, he can hide in Jack's tower as long as he wants, but since the casino is now under the control of the Helldivers, he is eventually going to be driven out of the casino, because yes, he does want the casino too as well, but unfortunately he's not going to get it. So Pretty Boy will also be kicked out of the casino. Now Timothy Lawrence was a Vault Hunter from the pre-sequel, so pretty much he's Jack's body double, and well, I think he is the last doppelganger in the casino. But pretty much since everyone is being kicked out of the casino, I think the target on his back will be completely removed. So Timothy would be freed, and pretty much almost everyone in the casino would of course be kicked out. Now Moxie would of course try and negotiate with the Helldivers to give her the casino, but of course, to her horror and surprise, Jack would of course tell Moxie that he is now their newest employee. By employee, I mean forced employee for Super Earth. So pretty much, even though Moxie has planned everything out, she is going to lose the casino a second time. So pretty much, Moxie and the Vault Hunters just wasted a whole bunch of their time, and pretty much they are now being forced to cut their losses and go away. So the Helldivers would of course get the factory inside of the Handsome Jackpot. Now Jack will of course wants to stay inside his casino and possibly reconnect himself with the Hyperion network, but the Helldivers would of course stop that possibility from even beginning, so they of course will take him back to the Super Destroyers. So in the end, that's how the DLC would end. But for the what if, so I think the question for this what if in a whole is, could the Helldivers colonize Pandora? And that is yes, they can, but it would of course be a bloody process in general. Now, if I can think of any other last thing that would probably happen, I'm going to be honest, I can totally see Tina buying into the Helldiver ad, and yeah, Tina becomes a Helldiver. Yeah, so 500, so she gets to drop a 500k bomb. Okay, but other than that, that's the end of the video. But I know I've been trying to get at least a big video out, and yes, I was supposed to do a theory vid first, but I just wanted to get a what if out in general, so I will continue trying to make that Fallout theory video. But other than that, thank you for watching, and have a great day.